Welcome to chapter 12 and 13 in our Jubilees series. We're going to talk about Abraham. The days of Noah have ended, and now it's the days of Abraham. We're going to go all the way from his birth to the rescue of Lot. And the background from last week is Noah has passed away, and the wicked children of men had built the Tower of Babel, and they got scattered, and they've been fighting, and nation against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and what was happening before the flood is been coming back. So, into this, we're going to pick up in Jubilees 11 just a little bit. I wanted to break up subject matter so that this video would then start talking about Abram. So, it says in verse 14, and in this 39th Jubilee, in the second week, in the first year, Terah took to himself a wife, and her name was Edna, the daughter of Abram, the daughter of his father's sister. And in the 7th year of this week, she bare him a son, and called his name Abram, and by the name of the father of his mother, for he had died before his daughter had conceived a son. So Abram is named after his maternal grandfather. This is lining up with Genesis in chapter 11. Now Jubilees goes on to a bunch of very pertinent and interesting things, I think, that are totally not in Genesis. Abram is seeking deliverance. It says in verse 16, and the child began to understand the errors of the earth, that all went astray after graven images and after uncleanness. And his father taught him writing. And he was 2 weeks of years old, and he separated himself from his father, that he might not worship idols with him. Verse 17, and he began to pray to the Creator of all things, that he might save him from the errors of the children of men, and that his portion should not fall into error after uncleanness and vileness. So Abraham at this point is 14 years old, and the teenager gets it that something's really wrong, okay, in the world. And, we think about the poor kids born into this world right now. Some of us do. And Abram was born into a place full of uncleanness and idolatry and errors, and everybody's going astray. So I think it's very important, this story, and it's teaching about Abram's character from early on, and that's missing in Genesis, okay? And this part here about his father taught him writing, now this can't be the ancient language because he is taught this later. So he's not being taught the ancient biblical language. We could deduce from this that it means that the writings of the Watchers was not in the Yehudia's Paleo-Hebrew either, because later in Jubilees it says the language was not used since Tower of Babel, and Abram is taught not by his dad. So this is kind of just an interesting point. And Abram is setting himself apart. He's starting to say sinners, not necessarily a sinner's prayer, but right here, but he is seeking the Creator. And he knows things are wrong, and he doesn't want to be caught up in it. Continuing on to more stories that are not in Genesis, Abram defeats the ravens. In verse 18, and the seed time came for the sowing of the seed upon the land, and they all went forth together to protect their seed against the ravens. Remember, Bastema was sending ravens and trying to starve them. And Abram went forth with those that went, and the child was a lad of 14 years. And a cloud of ravens came to devour the seed, and Abram ran to meet them before they settled on the ground, and cried to them before they settled on the ground to devour the seed. And he said this to the ravens, descend not, return to the place where you came. And they proceeded to turn back. And he caused the clouds of ravens to turn back that day 70 times. And all of the ravens throughout all the land where Abram was there settled there, not so much as one. I mean, wherever Abram was, there was no ravens getting to the ground. And all of who were with him throughout all the land saw him and cried out, and all the ravens turned back, and his name became great in all the land of the Chaldees. Okay, so notice the 70 number. That's an important biblical number, the 70 right there. So He's done it a important number of times. The land of the Chaldees, just a note, week 14 takes us into month 4. And there's a story on day 5 of Ezekiel having his vision. And he is taken to this very land, the place where in Shem's line, the Watcher's information ended up. You might want to keep this in mind when you study out Ezekiel and the shock of what he ends up seeing. It was in this place where Abram is saying, please deliver me from. So Abram is born in that land and is rejecting it. Okay. And he's overcoming the ravens that Mastema sent. So he's a special lad already. Verse 22, and there came to him this year all those that wished to sow. And he went with them until the time of sowing ceased, and they sowed their land. And that year they brought enough grain home, and they ate and were satisfied. So Abram, the people are already being fed, and they were better off because of the boy. Verse 23, and in the first year of the 5th week, Abram taught those who made implements for oxen, the artificers in wood, and they made a vessel above the ground facing the frame of the plow in order to put the seed thereon. And the seed fell down, there was from upon the share of the plow and was hidden in the earth, and they no longer feared the ravens. So he figured out how to plant the seed and cover it up at the same time. 24. And after this manner they made vessels above the ground on the frames of the plows, that they sowed and tilled all the land according as Abram commanded, and they no longer feared the birds. So Abram's first victory. Not only is he brave, but he's smart. Okay. Now, Abram, is the next section, defeats his father's idols. Now we're officially in the Jubilees, chapter 12. And it came to pass in the 6th week, in the 7th year thereof, that Abram said to Terah his father, saying, Father. And as he said, Behold, here I am, my son. And he said, this is Abram, What help and profit have we from those idols which you do worship, and before which you do bow yourself? For there is no spirit in them, for they are dumb forms, and a misleading of the heart. Worship them not. Worship Yahuwah, the sovereign ruler of heaven, who causes the rain and the dew to descend to the earth, and does everything upon the earth, and has created everything by his word, and all his life is from before his face. Why do you worship things that have no spirit in them? For they are the works of hands, and your shoulders do you bear them, and you have no help from them. But they are a great cause of shame to those who make them, and a misleading of the heart to those who worship them. Worship them not. And his father said to him, I also know it, my son, but what shall I do with the people who have made me to serve before them? Now this is another important story, not in Genesis. You see, all this is about Abraham's insight, Abraham's understanding commandments, perceiving right and wrong. He's got quite the character, but this is missing from Genesis. Yep, I just find that there's a huge character difference between a lot of people in Jubilees and Genesis. Verse 7, and if I tell them the truth, this is his father talking, if I tell them the truth, they will slay me, for their souls cleave to them to worship them and honor them. Keep silent, my son, lest they slay you. And these words he spoke to his 2 brothers, and they were angry with him, and he kept silent. So nobody wanted to listen to Abram. And in the 40th Jubilee, in the 2nd week, in the 7th year thereof, Abram took to himself a wife, and her name was Sarai, the daughter of his father, and she became his wife. And Haran, his brother, took to himself a wife in the 3rd year of the 3rd week, and she bare him a son in the 7th year of the week, and called his name Lot. And Nahor, his brother, took to himself a wife, and in the 60th year of the life of Abram, that is, in the 4th week, in the 4th year thereof, Abram arose by night, and he burned the house of the idols, and he burned all that was in the house, and no man knew it. That's something that's in the Torah about destroying idols. And there's Abraham doing it in secret. Okay, now the family moves. 13. And they arose in the night and sought to save their gods from the midst of the fire. And Haran hasted to save them, but the fire flamed over him, and he was burnt in the fire. And he died in Ur of the Chaldees before Terah his father, and they buried him in Ur of the Chaldees. And Terah went forth from Ur of the Chaldees, he and his sons, to go out of the land of Lebanon and into the house of Canaan, and he dwelt in the land of Haran, and Abram dwelt with Terah his father in Haran 2 weeks of years. So I've just made a note here that Haran died in the presence of his father, and that Ur of the Chaldees, that Ur word there means light. So the light of the Chaldeans is what that Genesis says right there. Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in the land of his kindred in the light of the Chaldeans. Ur. Sounds like light of the Yahushua will be light for the Gentiles. It's the same kind of phrasing there. I thought that was interesting. And they moved to some place that's got the same name as his brother that died. That's interesting. Okay, now we're going to get to the Call of Abraham. That's what I labeled this section, starting in verse 16. And in the 6th week, in the 5th year thereof, Abram sat up throughout the night on the new month of the 7th month to observe the stars from the evening to the morning in order to see what would be the character of the year. And with regard to the rains, and he was alone as he sat and observed. Now he's doing this on trumpets, what we call the Festival of Trumpets, or Yom Teruah. Okay, so it's the first day of the basically Babylon Assyrian New Year. This is totally missing from Genesis 2. Verse 17. And a word came into his heart, and he said, all the signs of the stars and the signs of the moon and the sun are all in the hand of Yahuwah. Why do I search them out? If he desires, he causes it to rain morning and evening, and if he desires, he withholds it, and all things are in his hand. And he prayed that night and said, my sovereign ruler, Yahuwah, most high, you alone are my sovereign ruler, and you and your dominion have I chosen. And you have created all things, and all things that are the work of your hands. Deliver me from the hands of the evil spirits who have dominion over the thoughts of men's hearts, and let them not lead me astray from you, my sovereign ruler. And establish you me and my seed forever, that we go not astray from henceforth and forevermore. And he said, shall I return unto Ur of the Chaldees, who seek my face, that I may return to them? Am I to remain here in this place? The right path before you, prosper it in the hands of your servant, that he may fulfill it, and that I may not walk in the deceitfulness of my heart, O Yahuwah, my sovereign ruler. Now, I call this, I did a video just on this section of Jubilees. Abram's saying the first sinner's prayer. He knows he's got stuff in his heart that could lead him astray. It needs to be healed. And he's praying for deliverance. He doesn't want to go astray. He realizes that he's doing something that really is wrong. He's doing divination with the stars. And so he cries out, and this is missing from Genesis, you see, because what happens in Genesis next, there's been this absence of whole story. It just says, now Yahuwah said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I mean, Genesis makes it appear that Yahuwah picks Abram out of nowhere. And Jubilees tells you the story of the young lad growing up, how insightful he is, how caring he is. He cares about the seed. He doesn't want to go astray. He cries out for deliverance. And of course, what happens? He gets a response. This is the response to his prayer. And he made an end of speaking and praying, and behold, the word of Yahuwah was sent to him through me, saying, get you up from your country and from your kindred and from the house of your father unto a land which I will show you. And I shall make you a great and numerous nation, singular. And I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you shall be blessed in the earth, and in you shall all families of the earth be blessed. And I will bless them that bless you, and curse them that curse you. And I will be a sovereign ruler to you and your son, and to your son's son, and to all your seed. Fear not, from henceforth unto all generations of the earth, I am Yahuwah, your sovereign ruler. Okay. And in this, right here, so far, I want you to pay attention that there's no cursing of Abraham's people in this whole story about Abram. He doesn't ever say, if you don't do exactly what I say, you're going to be cursed and here's what's going to happen to you. It's usually the, people who are cursing you, they're going to end up being cursed, which is part of the principle that's in the Bible, that you're going to reap what you sow. So people who come and curse Abraham are going to basically be cursing themselves by doing so. Okay, verse 25. And Yahuwah El Shaddai said, open his mouth and his ears, that he may hear and speak with his mouth, with the language which has been revealed, for it has ceased from the mouths of all the children of men from the day of the overthrow. Okay. And I opened his... Okay, first of all, realize that the first thing after giving him a blessing that he is wanting Abram to do is study the language, to learn the language. That's the first thing. And I opened his mouth. This is the angel who's telling all this to Moses, says, and I opened his mouth and his ears and his lips, and I began to speak with him in the Hebrew, in the tongue of the creation. And he took the books of his fathers, and these were written in Hebrew, in that language, and he transcribed them, and he began from henceforth to study them. And I made known to him that which he could not understand, and he studied them during the 6 rainy months. So the very first thing that Abram is doing is learning the language and in understanding the books of his fathers, which I'm going to basically understand that as, like Enoch, the writings that came down to Noah, and Noah's writings were then passed down. The information that Noah had received on the herbs to combat the evil spirits, all this, I would say he was then able to read. Okay, verse 28. And it came to pass in the 7th year of the 6th week that he spoke to his father and informed him that he would leave Haran to go to the land of Canaan to see it and return to him. And Terah his father said to him, go in shalom. May the eternal Yahuwah make your path straight, and Yahuwah be with you, and protect you from all evil, and grant unto you free unmerited pardon, mercy, and favor before those who see you. And may none of the children of men have power over you to harm you. Go in shalom. And if you see a land pleasant to your eyes to dwell in, then arise and take me to you, and take Lot with you, the son of Haran, your brother, as your own son. May Yahuwah be with you. And Nahor, your brother, leave with me till you return in shalom, and we will go with you together. So Abram gets his father's blessing to go. Now this is after the 6 rainy months. So Abram starts a journey into what is basically the promised land with altars. He builds an altar. Okay, so we're in Jubilees chapter 13 now. And Abram journeyed from Haran, and he took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother, Haran's son, to the land of Canaan, and he came to Ashur, and proceeded to Shechem, and dwelt near a lofty oak. And he saw, and behold, the land was very pleasant, from the entering of Hamath to the lofty oak. And Yahuwah said to him, to you and to your seed will I give this land. And he built an altar there, and he offered thereon a burnt sacrifice to Yahuwah, who had appeared to him. So Yahuwah appears to Abraham. That's a seeing word with your sight. And speaks to Abram. And Abram builds an altar there. Okay? It's in Shechem, near an oak tree. This is a very famous place that Abraham always comes back to. And verse 5, and he removed from there to the mountain Bethel on the west, and he removed there to the mountain Bethel on the west and Ai on the east, and pitched his tent there. And he saw, and behold, the land was very wide and good, and everything grew thereon, vines and figs and pomegranates, oaks and elixes and terebinths, and oil trees and cedars and cypresses and date trees and all trees of the field. And there was water on the mountains. Okay. Now, the two texts line up here really well, Genesis and Jubilees at this point. And I just had a note here. Consider how later on the people must defeat the king of Ai with the power of the house of Elohim before they cross over. The names of these two places are meaningful in Scripture, Bethel and Ai. And that is a name that should be just ringing in your ears today. Defeating Ai before you go into the promised land. Hint, hint. And he blessed Yahuwah, verse 7, and he blessed Yahuwah who had led him out of the Ur of the Chaldees and had brought him to this land. Verse 8. And it came to pass in the first year, in the 7th week, on the new month of the first month, now we're at the beginning of the biblical year, that he built an altar on this mountain and called on the name of Yahuwah. You, the eternal Yahuwah, are my sovereign ruler. And he offered on the altar a burnt sacrifice unto Yahuwah, that he should be with him and not forsake him all the days of his life. Now, this is not in the King James. And this is part of why Jubilees is so interesting. And I've been taking all the dating out of Jubilees because it dates things. This is coming from the heavenly historical record that the angel is reading from to Moses, the official record, and they date things. So they know exactly when something happened. This is also, this offering and sacrifice is happening on Noah's Remembrance Day, the first day of the year. Okay, verse 10 in Jubilees. And he removed from there and went towards the south, and he came to Hebron, and Hebron was built at that time. And he dwelt there 2 years. So he's getting there when Hebron was built. And he went there into the land of the south to Beloth, and there was a famine in the land. Now, Genesis just says that there was a famine in the land. It doesn't, remember, that's all it says to match up here in verse 10 of Genesis. Okay, now this happens to be, I want you to see this, okay, when we go through what's coming next. Abram and Sarai have a pattern that is established that Jacob and Joseph fall into later. I mean, the pattern started here for a famine that causes you to go to Egypt. It started here with Abram and Sarai. They experienced the same thing, okay? So keep this in mind. So there was a famine in the land. They had gone and done sacrifice. He sees a beautiful place, but there's famine. And verse 11, and Abram went into Egypt in the 3rd year of the week, and he dwelt in Egypt 5 years before his wife was torn away from him. Now Tanis in Egypt was at that time built 7 years after Hebron. Okay, so let's unpack this just a little bit. In Genesis, they go down to Egypt to sojourn there, for there was a famine in the land. We get that. And Genesis says, when he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarai, his wife, I know that you are a woman beautiful in appearance, and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is my wife. Then they will kill me, but they will let you live. So say you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared for your sake. So the stories are really different. I mean, Genesis has got in here that Abram is wanting his wife, they want to tell stories and not admit who she is. So he's saying, we need to lie so that I can live. That is not in Jubilees whatsoever. In fact, the timing of when Sarah is taken is not the same at all. Because Jubilees says they went and dwelt in Egypt for 5 years before she was taken. She was seized. Okay. Tanis. Now, verse 12 says, now Tanis in Egypt was at that time built. Now, Tanis is land where the cities of Ramses was built later on in history. They go to Goshen. So Abram and Sarai are living exactly where Jacob and his sons would settle down through the generations. Their grandson would end up there with all the people. That would be the land that was given to them by Joseph to live in. So see, they're doing the journey right now for the first time. Okay. Now, here's a picture. Here's a link to where it comes from. Tanis is this little city right here in the... Blow this up just for a second. Here's Tanis right here in the Delta area, and Avaris is right below it. Okay? And the reason I'm mentioning that is researchers and archaeologists believe that this could be where the Hyksos kings were, and their capital was Avaris. So it's right next to that. In Arabic, this was fascinating. This right here in Tanis and Avaris, in Arabic, it's called San el Hagar. Okay? And I was like, whoa, we got Hagar's name in there. If you're in Arabic, you're going to be saying San el Hagar. That was interesting. I've left some articles on this subject of Tanis and Avaris in our community in this chapter of Jubilees if you want to read more about it. Okay, so I also found out that Tanis is a city that is depicted and is the setting for the Raiders of the Lost Ark movie. I thought that was just hilarious. Okay. So, in Genesis, this is not in Jubilees. In Genesis, it continues. It says, when Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw the woman was very beautiful. And when the princes of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh. And the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And for her sake, he dwelt well with Abram. And he had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, female donkeys, and camels. So see, in Genesis, basically, Pharaoh is seizing Sarai at the beginning, and Abram's becoming wealthy from Pharaoh in exchange. That's what the Genesis story says. So that's not what Jubilees teaches. Okay. So this is necessary in Genesis because Pharaoh's going to say some things to Abram later on that are just not even in Jubilees. There's no plot to lie to Pharaoh, and Abram is not afraid of anything. I mean, Genesis is making Abram afraid. It's not in Jubilees. Verse 13 of Jubilees. And it came to pass when Pharaoh seized Sarai, the wife of Abram, that Yahuwah plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And Abram was very wealthy by reason of possessions in sheep, cattle, asses, horses, camels, men servants, maidservants, and in silver and gold exceedingly. And Lot also, his brother's son, was wealthy. See, they were already wealthy. They didn't take anything from Pharaoh. And verse 15. And Pharaoh gave Sarai, the wife of Abram, back, and he sent him out of the land of Egypt. Okay, so in Jubilees, as soon as Pharaoh seizes Sarai, plagues happen. And Pharaoh relents immediately and sends Abram away. He doesn't give him anything. He's like, get out of here. Okay, but in Genesis, okay, it's when Pharaoh seizes Sarai, and it says at the beginning, it says, but Yahuwah afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. So Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this you have done to me, and why did you not tell me she was your wife? Why did you say to me, she is my sister, so that I took her for my wife? Now then, here is your wife, take her and go. And Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. Now another problem with the Genesis account is in verse 14, it says that Abram enters Egypt, and the princes saw her, and she was taken to Pharaoh's house. I mean, it's like immediately. There's no time passing in here. And then as soon as she's taken to his house, the plagues start, and he calls out to Abraham and sends them away and says, go away. Where's the time that they actually lived in Egypt during the famine? Okay? Whereas in Jubilees, they're there for 5 years before the incident happens. They've had time to eat in a plentiful area during the famine. But the timing in Genesis to me is very suspect. And in Genesis, Abram's taking things from Pharaoh, and in Jubilees, he's not. Pharaoh didn't give him a thing. Back to Jubilees. So he sent him out of the land of Egypt, and he journeyed to the place where he had pitched his tent at the beginning, to the place of the altar, with Ai on the east and Bethel on the west, and he blessed Yahuwah, his sovereign ruler, who had brought him back in Shalom. Now, there's no mention of this in Genesis. Genesis is missing the offering of thanksgiving to Yahuwah for coming home safely. It is missing the precedent of Jacob's vow and the returning to offer thanksgiving. You see, Abram's doing what Jacob is going to do in his lifetime. Abraham set the pattern. Here's the pattern. And I have deduced, and I put this on the calendar, if you watch our calendar episodes, which I hope you do, the timing of this, when I'm looking at going through the calendar, I suspect, and it's just a theory, based upon the calendar dating of this, that this is happening around the time of Passover and unleavened bread. Verse 16, to conclude this little section, and it came to pass in the 41st Jubilee, in the 3rd year of the week, that he returned to this place and offered thereon a burnt sacrifice and called on the name of Yahuwah and said, "You are the most high Yahuwah, are my sovereign ruler forever and ever." And Genesis pretty much says the same thing. Next section is about Abraham and Lot separating, and they are different. Okay. So I want you to note, I put this here in the pink because I've been doing pink on the type and shadow stuff. I said, does this too represent the first time the family is broken up? Remember, some of the tribes wanted to stay on the east side of the river on the east side of the rest of the tribes and did not want to live on the other side of the Jordan with everybody else. So I see this as the pattern. They come back into the land, and there's a split in the family. So there was a split in the tribes. Okay. Verse 17. And in the 4th year of this week, Lot parted from him, and Lot dwelt in Sodom, and the men of Sodom were sinners exceedingly. And it grieved Abram in his heart that his brother's son had parted from him, for he had no children. Okay. Now, so in Jubilees, there's nothing going on between Abram and Lot, other than Lot separates and goes to Sodom, where there's evil. Okay. In Genesis, obviously, is probably a story you're familiar with, there was strife. It says, and Lot, who went with Abraham, also had flocks and herds and tents, so that the land could not support both of them dwelling together, for their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. At that time, the Canaanites and Perizzites were dwelling in the land. Then Abram said to Lot, this is Genesis, by the way, "Let there be no strife between you and me, and between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, for we are kinsmen. Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself from me. If you take the left hand, then I will go to the right. If you take the right hand, I will go to the left." And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Yahuwah, like the land of Egypt, in the direction of Zor. This is before Yahuwah destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself all the Jordan Valley, and Lot journeyed east. Thus they separated from each other. Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled among the cities of the valley and moved his tent as far as Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against Yahuwah. Okay, so the strife is not told in Jubilees. I'm going to continue now in Jubilees, verse 19. In that year when Lot was taken captive, Yahuwah said to Abram, after that Lot had parted from him in the 4th year of this week. So Lot leaves, and Yahuwah says something to Abram. Lift up your eyes from the place where you are dwelling northward and southward, westward and eastward. For all the land which you see I will give to you and to your seed forever. And I will make your seed as the sand of the sea. Though a man may number the dust of the earth, yet your seed shall not be numbered. Arise, walk through the land, in the length of it and the breadth of it, and see it for all, and for to your seed will I give it. Now this is different. And there's something I'm going to point out here is really different from the King James. In the King James Genesis, I'm going to read from verse 14. Yahuwah said to Abram after Lot had separated, Lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, your offspring also will be counted. Arise, walk through the length and the breadth of the land, and I will give it to you. Okay. So, Jubilees says, though a man may number the dust, yet your seed will not be numbered. Whereas in Genesis it says, if one can count the dust of the earth, your offspring can also be counted. Now, I want you to notice that, and I'm not going to go into it here, but this is something very interesting to trace out through scripture to find out what it means to be numbered. We can talk about that in our discussion group if you'd like to, and at another time. This subject of the numbering is also in some of the not numbering is part of the blessings and jubilees too that we'll get to later on. Okay, and Abram went to Hebron and dwelt there. Same thing in Genesis. Now we've got the story of Abram rescuing Lot. So I'm going to read to you what's in Jubilees. Verse 22. And in this year came Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Armaphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Selasar, and Turgal, king of nations, and slew the king of Amorah, and the king of Sodom fled, and many fell through wounds in the valley of Siddim by the salt sea. And they took captive Sodom and Adam, that's Admah, and Zeboim, and they took captive Lot also, the son of Abram's brother, and all his possessions, and they went to Dan. Now, Genesis has got similar information. That's why I said it was Admah, that they went and took things from. And I'm not going to go through and read Genesis just for time purposes, but I've lined them up because the text then lines up. When Jubilees continues in verse 24, it lines up perfectly with Genesis 13. So I would just say that Genesis has got more details that you can notice if you make some comments on the video if you want to about things that you see in these two sections here that are different. And continuing on in Jubilees, verse 24. And one who had escaped came and told Abram that his brother's son had been taken captive, and Abram armed his household servants. For Abram and for his seed, a tenth of the... listen to this. We're talking about they're getting ready to go to war. And then verse 25, I've highlighted it for a reason. Then it says, for Abram and for his seed, a tenth of the first fruits to Yahuwah, and Yahuwah ordained it as an ordinance forever, that they should give it to the priests who serve before him, and that they should possess it forever. And to this Torah there is no limit of days, and he has ordained it for generations forever, that they should give to Yahuwah the tenth of everything, of the seed, of the wine, and of the oil, and of the cattle, and of the sheep. And he gave it unto his priests to eat and to drink with joy before him. He's going to do this, really, and he gave it unto his priests to eat, and he's going to do this. He's arming his household. And this text just feels so inserted right here. I'm not debating, okay, I'm not going to go into a debate on the Tanakh and tithing, and it's all through Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. I'm saying in the book of Jubilees, this feels like it got stuck in here. Okay? This is Abram saying and agreeing with the first fruits during the summer harvests, okay? and it just feels like it doesn't flow. So let me go back and just pick up the story again and continue. And one who had escaped came and told Abram that his brother's son had been taken captive, and Abram armed his household. And the king of Sodom came to him. Okay. Yeah. I think this got changed here. Like this right here in the highlighted section I'm showing, verses 25 through 27. This should have been, we don't even have the battle story in Jubilees. I'm gonna just go through Jubilees. Okay, so we've got, they get ready to go to war, and now there's Torah stuck in here about they're supposed to do tithing. And then in verse 28 it says, and the king of Sodom came to him. This is after the battle. And bowed himself before him and said, Our Lord Abram, give unto us the souls which you have rescued, but let the booty be yours. Okay, do you see how that just doesn't flow? Like we didn't get the battle information. They're getting ready to go to war, and there is no war in Jubilees. Let's look at Genesis. Okay, so Genesis does say, see, this battle section got removed and replaced. Verse 14, when Abram heard that his kinsman had been taken captive, he led forth his trained men born in his house, 318 of them, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. Well, that's good, because Jubilee said they went to Dan. And he divided his forces against them by night, he and his servants, and defeated them and pursued them to Hobath, north of Damascus. Then he brought back all the possessions, and he brought back his kinsman Lot with all his possessions and the woman and the people. Okay, so at least Genesis does tell us they went and defeated them and pursued them, and now they're bringing everything back, which gives us the context that got taken out of Jubilees, in my opinion. And then we have, in both stories, the king of Sodom comes out to meet him, and Genesis says it's in the valley of Sheva, that is the king's valley. Now, Jubilees does not say where, okay? And you have to ask yourself, I went in search of this, where is this valley? Okay, and I found two different places on two different maps. I asked, I even went to Google Maps, so where is this? Okay, and you end up either in Jerusalem itself, or you end up on the side that Lot had of Sodom and Gomorrah, and there is a place there, the Valley of Sheva. There's a place here in the little red dot. This is over here where Sodom and Gomorrah are, which is where Lot's people are from, which was, Abram would be taking them home. And if they met with this king over here in Jerusalem, it's kind of like in the wrong place. But that's what you're going to get when you go searching for this. And it just so happens that there's a Salem, spelled the same way as Salem, Salem, Shalom, Shin Lamed Mem. There is a place here right south of the Sea of Galilee. Okay, right here, there's a place that matches up with the whole Melchizedek story. I just want to point this out. Okay, now there's a big blank thing here in Jubilees. You see, Jubilees says, and the king of Sodom came to him, and then it continues, and bowed himself before him and said, Our Adonai Abram, give unto us the souls which you have rescued, but let the booty be yours. And Abram said to him, I lift up my hands to the Most High Yahuwah, that from a thread to a shoe latchet I shall not take aught that is yours, lest you should say, I have made Abram rich. So he's refusing, okay, to take anything from the king of Sodom, save only what the young men have eaten. See, obviously the warriors are going to have to eat. Everybody's got to eat during the battle. And the portion of men who went with me, Anur, Eshcol, and Mamre, these shall take their portion. So Jubilees is saying, we're going to work from the end of it back up. Abram is saying that their portion is not his. Anar, Eshcol, Mamre, if they're to get some booty, they can have it. That's up to them. But Abraham is not giving to anyone their portion. He's not giving it away to anybody, and he didn't take any in Jubilees. So in Jubilees, there is no record of Abram taking from Pharaoh. In Genesis, Abraham does. He gets rich off Pharaoh. And in Jubilees, Abram is saying, I want nothing, no spoils, no slaves, nothing from you. So he has nothing extra to give to anybody. These two stories are pretty different. I mean, they're still telling the same story, but there's some details here that give you a different understanding of Abram and his character and what model and pattern he set. Okay, so if we follow Genesis along, the king of Sodom comes out to meet him at this valley. And then verse 18, see, none of this Melchizedek is in Jubilees. But Genesis has, and Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of the Most High. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram by God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. And he blessed God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. And Abram gave him 1/10 of everything. Now, continuing on, I'm going to come back to that, but continuing on in Genesis, and the king of Sodom said to Abram, Give me the persons, but take the goods for yourself. And Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted my hand to Yahuwah Elohim Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, that I would not take a thread or sandal strap of anything that is yours, lest you say I've made Abram rich. So they're similar here. This page that we're staring at right here, it's similar. But this page is way different because on verses 18, 19, and 20 of Genesis are not in Jubilees. So in Jubilees, there is no Melchizedek. There is no priest that comes to bless Abraham. There is no story in Jubilees of any ordained authentic priesthood existing that the worship the Elohim Most High. That's just, I'm not saying it may not have existed, but I'm just saying it's not in Jubilees. You would think that this would have been recorded and written down, but it wasn't. There is no story of Jubilees anywhere in the book of a Melchizedek, of a Zadok, righteous Melech. Melech, in its fullness of meaning and translations, is ascend to the throne, reign, king, queen, to induct into royalty, to take counsel. This is the word that also gets translated Molech. Now, Genesis is implying that Abram kept booty and gave Melchizedek 10% of something that in Jubilees he's refusing to keep. Where is, I asked myself, where's Salem? Because Jerusalem was called Jebus at this time. Joshua can't find on any maps where Jerusalem was called Salem or Salem. But there is the place I showed you up here that fits. And it's on the way back to take Lot home. I'll give it that. But why is Abraham giving 10% of what to someone that is not even mentioned anywhere else? There's no second witness to this. A lot of times we see Jubilees and Genesis are witnessing to the same thing, but I just want to point this out, that this is not in the book of Jubilees. And this is the end of the video. We're going to talk more about the Melchizedek word in our discussion. I hope you have enjoyed this video, Jubilees chapters 12 and 13, on the story of Abraham. Please like and comment. It will help more people see this video. It really will, folks. If you want more people to study Jubilees, please do that. And if you want to study more in depth with us and have access to these PDF files, there's a link for a free trial to our community in the description. You have a wonderful day. Shalom.